Dieter and Hutch coming to you before Monday Night Football, 49ers and Jets, week one. Couldn't be more excited about this one, Jake. And enigmas all over the field. I have no idea what we're getting in this contest, but let's try to break it down, see if we can get any closer to an answer over the next 20 or so minutes, buddy.
Yeah, man. It's we've seen Aaron Rodgers, but it's been a couple of years and he's 40 years old, coming off an Achilles tear. So let's not assume anything.
It sounds bad. And going through, trying to find anything to latch onto, because obviously we only had 4 plays last year with Aaron Rodgers as the Jets quarterback. So I'm watching 2021 Packers film. That was him and Nate Hackett, though Nate Hackett wasn't calling plays. And obviously tried a little bit to get into the 2022 Packers film the last time Aaron Rodgers played. And I'm going to come back to this again and again. I feel like we've clearly seen the best Aaron Rodgers has to offer. His peak is as good as anybody's peak, perhaps in the history of the NFL. And his downslope, he was still winning MVPs. He kind of sucked in 2022, Jake. I don't know why we provide so much deference to a guy who had a negative EPA per pass attempt in 2022. And he was as bad as Andy Dalton, Marcus Mariota, and Kenny Pickett. Negative EPA per pass attempt. Like,
it felt like
this guy's special.
It felt like he was so upset that he didn't have a pure number one receiver that just like out of spite, he's like, I hate this. He was just so over it at that point with all the young wide receivers. And, I don't know. I'm not excusing him because it's not great, but it feels like he's a spiteful guy.
Well, and he did run himself out of town, and good for him. I guess he got to do it on his terms. And of course, it's not as if that Packers team was garbage. 49ers fans will remember vividly. They had to go into Lambeau Field, the Niners did, and Robbie Gould kicking the game-winning field goal. Some special teams heroes in that contest. Maybe we should have given Richard Hightower more respect when he was around. Regardless, we're trying to figure out what these Jets are on offense, and I can tell you right now, they have 2 of the most special players in the NFL, in Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. So it's a question of, is Rodgers still a viable NFL quarterback? Is he more like 21 Rodgers, more like 22 Rodgers, or just something much, much worse than even the latter version of that? And it has this offensive line, which has seen major turnover. Is it going to be good enough to block for a quarterback who wants to get the ball out quickly and really probably won't be able to move around very well either?
That's what I keep coming back to. So just beat by beat, the Jets offensive line. They replaced Mekhi Becton with Tyron Smith, Hall of Famer probably, who
hasn't played a full season since 2015.
Very injury prone. He had a resurgent season after like a bad 2022. So they're betting on that. Either way, he's an upgrade for him. They replaced Laken Tomlinson, who's been awful with the Jets, with John Simpson for the Raiders. Not exactly an upgrade there. Then they've got, the usual Shanahan-style center and Joe Tippmann. Bad pass blocker, good run blocker.
That's right.
Right guard, Elijah Vera Tucker, who's like very talented, but also coming off a torn Achilles.
Yeah.
So large guy to be dealing with that injury. And then Morgan Moses is very good. He's been good his whole career.
Love Morgan Moses.
They brought him back. That's solid. The reason that's so crucial is because Rodgers, like even when you go back to that 2021 season, here's the thing. When he was not pressured, league leading 126 QBR.
That's right.
When he was pressured, 58.1 QBR, 26th out of 31 quarterbacks.
Just butthole.
Just like, and that's not like, oh, well, everyone's worse under pressure. Like, no. He was a very, very bad quarterback under pressure.
So, I mean, Brock Purdy is not. There are some quarterbacks who it's a very small difference. That is a chasm. That is the difference between, I don't know, Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, if we want to just put it in 49ers terms. And they really do need to pass protect. And as I look at this 49ers defensive front, I'm still confident they can get after the quarterback. They were second in the NFL in pressures last year. Obviously, Nick Bosa coming in full campaign, or at least full preseason, ready to rumble. You know what you're getting with Javon Hargrave. Probably the best version of Javon Hargrave is coming in week 1. The hammies are going to feel the best. He's going to have the most explosion. And he was a menace for the first half of last season,
Yeah, he was.
particularly in the pass rush. It's just a question of the new guys, and that's defensive end. It's defensive tackle. We've talked about Malik Collins when we did the season preview. Let's get into the defensive end. It's going to be Leonard Floyd. It's going to be Robert Beal. That's it. I mean, that's all they got.
Yetur Gross-Matos it's looking very unlikely that he plays. I mean, that's a point of concern. Robert Beal hasn't proven himself against the run or really done anything.
Yeah.
Leonard Floyd was, I think, he's well-rounded, but mostly supposed to be a pass rusher, ideally. I think Yetur Gross-Matos was sort of slotted in to be a run-first sort of guy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting situation. I think Sam Aquanu could get some run here as just like early down edge setter. They're going to probably need to rotate a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then Malik Collins, we talked about him. He's going to be big against the run. I talked to him Thursday, and he was laughing about how old the 49ers front is because he, Hargrave, and Floyd are all going into year 9. Bosa's going into year 6.
Mm-hmm.
He and Hargrave, he's excited at least because he and Hargrave worked together in the offseason.
Okay.
So that's at least something where they understand each other's style. But yeah, like Leonard Floyd on the edge is interesting. No Yetur Gross-Matos. Like Breece Hall, I think, is the priority because if Hall gets loose, if he's gutting you up the middle and then bouncing it outside, then Rodgers is going to start to feel more and more comfortable. Like, I know that's the old thing. You run to set up the pass, and that's not necessarily 100% true, but it is crucial for the 49ers to not let Hall get loose, or it could be a rough day.
When you have a 40-year-old quarterback, they're still going to go with stuff like run to set up the pass. That's
Correct.
all way too newfangled for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who's been in this league since 2004, not 2014, 2004.
Played Nick Sorensen.
I mean, legitimately some people that we work with in our, young folks weren't born yet. Like it's obscene what's going on with Aaron Rodgers. And again, coming off the Achilles, you just got to wonder. I'm also very curious, Jake, on your opinion on if the Niners defense is going to look different. How much Brandon Staley influence are you going to get? Because as much as we say Nick Sorensen is moving them back, defensive coordinator Nick Sorensen is moving them back to a cover 3, that's not a different look. That's still fundamentally what they ran most of the time last year. It's still fundamentally what they built this defense personnel-wise around to be like that. And they did some experimentations during camp, which I found interesting, moving defensive tackles out to the edge, having edge rushers stand up. Obviously, they have versatility at the safety position, at the cornerback position. How much Brandon Staley influence do you think we see early in this contest?
That's a question I've been asking myself, and I think they have to mix it up a little bit off the start. And that's a good time to do that because there have been no reps of them really doing that.
Right.
And so if you're going to throw off Rodgers, who has not seen that, it's not the worst thing in the world to give him looks he's unfamiliar with because he knows this 49ers defense. They know what they should expect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much they're preparing for 3-4. I'm sure they've heard rumblings of it, but like if you haven't seen it from a defense with this personnel, like maybe they're watching a couple clips of Leonard Floyd, for keys if he's going to, play as that 3-4 stand-up, but I think the 49ers will throw a few wrinkles in there, especially even if it's just standing up Bosa and making the front look different and mixing up coverages a little bit where they're flashing some pressure and doing some simulated pressure, where it's not actually 5 guys blitzing, it's 4, but it's the linebacker instead of the end, and then you peel off Floyd into cover. I could see them doing it. I could see them throwing a little bit of because why not? It's Aaron Rodgers, week 1. It's a pretty easy schedule for the most part for the first 6 weeks. This is one of the toughest games they face.
Yeah.
Throw whatever you got out there.
One thing to add on top of that as well is when I say that Sorensen is trying to take them, but he's trying to take them back to the defense that Robert Saleh ran when he was in San Francisco. So when you talk about the Jets, they run a very similar defensive scheme. They're a wide 9 team. They're going to go with the two. They're going to have, a lot of single high, rotating safeties. They have a great secondary, much like the 49ers, arguably a better secondary than the 49ers.
Right.
It's if they're practicing, they might think they know how to properly prepare, because no one should know how to get you ready to face the 49ers defense better than Robert Saleh. And that
Yeah.
when you hear, hey, we want to go back to the way Robert Saleh did it, that's got to be music to his ears. Ego's got to play in a little bit. I got us ready for this one. And then, bam, here's the shadow defensive coordinator, Brandon
No
Staley,
question.
throwing some weird stuff at you, like double B-gap blitzers. And I'm fascinated to see what it is. And by the way, we got to note, it could be absolutely nothing.
They could just go super simple week one, try not to confuse themselves and throw everyone off.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting. These teams are built similarly. Just for a couple people who haven't seen like Brees Hall for some reason or Garrett Wilson, I'm just going to throw a couple clips out there. This is just Brees Hall pitch to the left, and he's a very fast guy. That's all it comes down to. Like,
he's the closest thing the NFL has to a second Christian McCaffrey.
Right. I would say he's a little different because I think Hall is faster. I feel like McCaffrey after 15, 20 yards gets caught. Hall is a guy that has that breakaway speed getting downhill.
He's got those young legs. He's also just a brilliant catcher out of the backfield. I don't think anyone was targeted more on routes run last year than Brees Hall, which is not terribly surprising given that he played for the Jets and they were running Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle out there at quarterback for the vast majority of the season. But you don't want this man to have the ball in his hands when he's running it, and you don't want the man to catch the ball so that he can then run it. You just don't want him to touch the ball, and that has to be priority number one. You're spot on with that.
And number two is Garrett Wilson, who, listen, you go back to 2021, not just because it was Rodgers with Nate Hackett, but because that was the last time he had a pure number one receiver.
It's true.
And that's what Rodgers loves, is to have Devontae Adams type. And he clearly believes that Garrett Wilson is the same, or in sort of that caliber. This is him.
He has every reason to believe that too.
This is him just receiver. He's breaking out with a guy on inside leverage against him, and he snaps off against him and beats him. It's just, for a guy that young, it's really impressive veteran stuff. And that's something that Rodgers is going to take some shots. They're going to take shots at whoever is opposite Charvarius Ward, and they're going to win. Like, they're going to win at certain points. Garrett Wilson's that good. He's going to win. I don't know what to expect from Mike Williams if he's actually playing. He's coming off an ACL. I think, Malachi Corley, we'll see. They might try and use him a little bit like Debo, some dink and dunk, easy stuff. We'll see.
I mean, Alan Lazard is still there. That's a thing, the Lazard people. Xavier Gipson,
Tyler Conklin's a solid tight end.
He is. A lot of drops, but a rock-solid tight end. I got to ask you, do you think Charvarius Ward will be shadowing Garrett Wilson in this game? Because
I don't. I think the 49ers tend to go against that. They didn't really do it with Richard Sherman. I think in the past they've sort of strayed away from that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if Wilson is just killing like Isaac Yiadom, they might change it up. But I also think Isaac Yiadom's a really good corner, and they can probably negotiate that or navigate that fairly well.
That'll be an interesting thing, because that's one of those wrinkles that would show a pretty big influence. They did it a couple times last year. Don't get me wrong, but it would show the influence of Staley, who would very much be of the mold from his past history of, hey, we gotta have our best against their best, particularly when there's no viable number two option as a receiver, at least from our vantage point right now. Let's flip it over. 49ers offense. And it's healthy. It's full go. I just don't know what it is, because we literally have not been able to see it practice once.
Right.
We don't get to watch practices once regular season starts. Regular season started. That was the first day that Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey were all out there. So we haven't gotten to see anything that they can do. And while it's not like a the defense where Brandon Staley's coming in and there's a chance of getting really funky and weird and mixing things up. We also just don't have a read on where a Brandon Ayuk is in his physical journey, where a Trent Williams is, where Christian McCaffrey is. And going into a game against this kind of defense, particularly this kind of secondary, and let's be even more specific, this kind of interior pass rusher in Quentin Williams, that's a really dangerous game to be playing. Let's start with the run game and McCaffrey.
Okay.
Do you have a first off, the Niners have to do it. They even though that's a difficult thing to do, you have to run directly at Quentin Williams again and again and again. You need to tire him out. You need to use the advantage that your offensive line has, which is they can actually run block because they're terrible at pass pro, but they can run block regardless of if Trent Williams is in there or not. Do you feel like McCaffrey has it in him to be the bell cow in this game? And if the 49ers offensive line has it in him to move this impressive Jets defensive front, which also, we should include CJ Mosley and Quincy Williams in this, two very, very good linebackers. Do they have the ability to run the ball against this Jets defense with Christian McCaffrey, or are we going to see some Jordan Mason in this game too?
I think both. I think Christian McCaffrey is a sick man. I mean that as like a compliment. He is like a true just football man where he's obsessive about playing every single snap, and he's going to basically demand to be out there regardless of the cap stuff. I think they're going to have to protect him from himself. And Shanahan said pretty explicitly this offseason that I asked him about carrying the load. He's like, yeah, we're going to try and, maybe there's some pass snaps we can have him in where he's not necessarily running it. We can take that load off of him in terms of the touches between the tackles. Mm-hmm. I think they will run Jordan Mason a little bit in this game. And, but at the same time, they do what it takes to win.
Yeah. And so everyone has a plan until apparently you need to score a touchdown for an X6 consecutive game against Washington. So there's Christian McCaffrey out there.
Right. But I do think there's going to be a little bit of Jordan Mason. I think his style also suits running between the tackles in the first game of the season of just if you're trying to, because that's part of the interior run game is not necessarily you're trying to get explosives every play, but to wear on a defensive front and to deliver blows. And Mason is a guy that I think can kind of do that. So I still think it's going to be overwhelmingly McCaffrey, but I do think there's going to be some dose. I think they can run on this defense, but this defense has been together. This defense doesn't have a lot of, new parts. They lost John Franklin Myers, which is a loss for them. Michael Clemens is probably their early down, edge guy with Jermaine Johnson. Mm-hmm. But this defense is pretty much the same. They've got a lot of the same pieces. Salah, listen, they won 7 games with Zach Wilson at quarterback because this was a dynamic, really impressive defense. That's hard to do when you basically don't have a quarterback. I think it's going to be a challenge for the 49ers, but I also think I trust Kyle to dial up intelligent run plays and they're not invulnerable. I'll just pull up one play last year, and this is Devin Singletary. Yeah. This is Bobby Slowick. This is, a protege of Kyle Shanahan against this Jets defense, and they gash him up the middle with Devin Singletary, who's not a good running back.
Yeah, he's slow.
Just not. He's just not. But they run this beautiful run play, and it's what did we decide this was?
Well, it's a split. It's a jet concept duo on the middle. I mean, it's just inside zone. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that sometimes. And
it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. They've got the tight end pulling and my point is that's just an example to show it is possible to run on the inside of this defense, and there are vulnerabilities there. And when you do that, it does wear on them. It starts to open up stuff a little bit. And I think the 49ers, these teams are similarly constructed. Totally. 49ers have had vulnerabilities on the inside.
That's right.
So are the Jets. Even when with Quinnen Williams, you attack, you double team Quinnen Williams, and you go right after Javon Kinlaw.
That's right.
Again and again and again.
Kinlaw has put on weight. He seems to understand that he's never going to be an elite pass rusher. So he might actually be a run stuffer for this Jets team. It wouldn't shock me at all.
he showed a couple times. He made some plays in the playoffs in the run game that I was impressed with, but
I'll
we'll
never
see.
be able to unsee him being driven back by Jason
Yeah.
Kelce and Landon Dickerson 45 yards just over the course of 7 plays, just 5 yards backwards every single play. That's the kind of ick that you can't shake off. I'm when I heard that Javon Kinlaw, former 49er, had added 20 pounds, I went, where? Like, how could
Right.
that man be any more massive? And that mass wasn't being used, or certainly mass wasn't the issue with him when he was with the Niners, just got pushed back again and again and again in the run game. I'm with you. You double team Williams, who is susceptible in the run game, right? He's trying to split gaps. He's a brilliant player. When he gets, he can take on double teams and win and get sacks. So he only had 5.5 sacks last year. And so I wouldn't go as far to say that, he's of the premier caliber. I wouldn't say he's 95 on Kansas City here. So
he's not, but he's one step below that. Like, he's really damn good.
That's fair. So yeah, I think that the game plan is very clearly you attack Javon Kinlaw. And on offense, I don't know, or on the passing offense, I don't know where you attack, because you're dealing with Sauce Gardner, who I'm a Derek Stingley guy. I think he's going to step up. Obviously, you have Surtain. Sauce Gardner's cream of the crop. I don't know if that's a cooking pun or not, but like, he is unbelievable. And then you add in DJ Reed, who might be the most underrated player in the NFL, like legitimately. And then Michael Carter in the slot, who's so goddamn good. And you thought you liked San Francisco's corner group. This is just another echelon above that. Now, the depth, that gets a little wonky. They do have Isaiah Oliver on this team. So, you don't want to be, you don't want to get too heavy with it. But they did draft Quantez Stiggers, which we were kind of legitimately excited about during the draft
Toronto
process.
Argonauts, if I recall correctly.
Brandon Eccles, and there's some depth issues, but yeah.
Their safeties are good, not quite elite. They've got Tony Adams, who's I think entering his 3rd year. He's pretty solid.
Yeah.
Chuck Clark, who's been around forever.
But that's such a Robert Saleh move. He just wants the guys who can be in the right position, even if they can't make the play, as to maintain the form of the defense. And again, when you are willing and capable, it got to the point where Robert Saleh, zone defensive maestro, was playing man-to-man in the second half of last year because his corners were so goddamn good. He goes, I can win like this. I can put these guys on an island one-on-one, and the ball is not going to be completed against us. It's a huge test for Brandon Ayuk, who you just don't know. I think that there is possibility. I think this Kyle Shanahan offense does give you the best shot against these kind of corners who are going to be up in your grill, physical, going to shadow you. Sauce Gardner can got a little bit on change of direction. You don't want to be running 9 routes against him. You don't want to be running anything that's a straight line or backwards. You want to be going over the middle of the field, drag routes, slants, digs. My God, the digs that the 49ers can run. And that funnels it more into CJ Mosley and Quincy Williams' area, which is dangerous, of course, because both of those guys are good backers. But particularly with Mosley, I want him questioning what he sees.
No question. I would rather target Mosley than Williams, because I think he's been at, like, speed-wise, athleticism, I think Williams moves better.
No doubt.
And so that's a challenge. I think they're going to tunnel screen Debo quite a bit. They're going to get the ball in his hands. And it might look a little bit like a Jimmy offense at times. But at the same time, Saleh hasn't seen, Brock Purdy. Like, he's seen the Jimmy offense and those limitations. And obviously they'll have plenty of tape to go off. They're not going to be totally surprised. But it is something to see when you're like, I know what this offense is. It's like, you kind of haven't seen it.
No.
So I think that's interesting. I think at the core, like, if the Jets are running zone, Shanahan knows how to exploit that. But Purdy watching out for linebackers who are sinking a little further than they initially look like they might. That's going to be something, because he throws some dangerous balls at times.
He does.
So that's going to be something to watch. At the same time, I don't know. It's still Kyle Shanahan. It's a really, really good defense. It's obviously this is the most interesting part of the game. I'm interested to see how they handle Kittle. How much do they chip with him? Because this could be a big game for Kittle.
Right.
I think this is a matchup where like having a great tight end and stressing those linebackers, that could be huge in creating space elsewhere.
Yeah. And it's just a question on if they're allowed to exploit it. And if a couple of their players can exploit it, pass protection is always going to be an issue for this team.
Yep.
The left side, you're fine. But everywhere else, I mean, I'm not sure if Aaron Banks is a good pass pro guy or if he just has Trent Williams next to him. Like, I can't tell you. I have no idea. But center to right tackle, it's an issue. And we'll see what Dominic Pooney has. By the way, welcome to the NFL. Here's Quentin Williams.
Yeah. It's a tough assignment. I don't know. It's really tough to just throw out Colton McKivitz on an island. And that's the thing about Kittle. It's like he gets stuck blocking so much because you can't really, because you're paying your right tackle nothing. You can't really trust him. One thing about Trent Williams is I think it was mentioned yesterday by Chris Furster that, we'll see where Trent's conditioning is at. There's a possibility Jalen Moore could come in for a few snaps. We threw it out there. Make Trent eligible.
Weeks ago.
Make Trent eligible for a couple snaps. He has to come out because you're not allowed to switch and then stay in. You can stay in, I think, as an eligible, but you can't go back to left tackle. You have to come out for a play.
Yeah, if you have to report as eligible, you get one snap at it.
Right. And so I think that's a way where you get Trent Williams at tight end effectively.
Yes.
And you just let it rip. You pull him to the right side and just play murder ball for a couple snaps. One, because it's fun, and two, because he has to come out for a snap or two anyway. I think that would be an interesting way. You get a situation like that where it's, let's say, short yardage, third down. You just put Trent Williams in a jumbo package as your tight end.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, let me tell you something that I think might end up being a very important stat to remember throughout the season. The Niners, when they were in 12 personnel, so that's 2 tight ends on the field with 1 running back, were the second best team in EPA per play last year.
Yep.
0.17 per play, points added. So, and we're unbelievable in the pass, almost half a point per every snap in 2 tight ends. Eric Saubert is an out of this world blocker. And if you need to just play right tackle with 2 men, so be it, because you have players that can win one-on-one. And I even think if Brandon Ayuk's at his full capabilities, he can win one-on-one given the offense that Kyle Shanahan runs. He can win one-on-one with Sauce Gardner on the outside. And then you can get into the safeties who are a little less fleet of foot.
Yeah. Real quick before we, move on to our sort of X factors and predictions, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the status of the Jets defensive ends. They traded or they let Bryce Huff go to the Eagles.
That's right.
He was their number 1 pass rusher. He was 3rd in the league with a 22.9% pass rush win rate.
Right.
That's insane. And then they swapped for Hassan Reddick, who has not reported and will not play because they traded for him. The Eagles traded him because of a contract dispute. And the Jets went, well, we've heard sort of that he doesn't need a new contract. That's not true. He did need one, and they traded for him anyway, and he has not reported. So Hassan Reddick, who is, tied for 42nd in pass rush win rate, pretty good pass rusher, I think we all know.
Yeah.
He's not going to be there. And they also lost John Franklin Myers, who's just a really, not like bona fide elite in any category, but a very solid, above average run defender and pass rusher. They lost those 3 guys. So there's a lot on Jermaine Johnson. There's a lot on Will McDonald, who we're both high on. He's got incredible skill set, but he hasn't proven it. He had like 100, something snaps last year.
Right.
He did have like 16% pressure rate, which is basically Joey Bosa status.
Right.
It's not qualified, but he's a good pass rusher, but they did lose some pieces. They did bet on Hassan Reddick. Like, they don't have those guys. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Well, let's go right into the X factors then. Will McDonald is my X factor. Thanks for that, Jake. They're betting on him, right? The reason Hassan Reddick doesn't have the contract that he wants is because the Jets at some level feel comfortable with the group that they have. And I kind of get it. Tack McKinley coming in as well. You got Clemens. He can set the edge for you. McDonald, Johnson. But McDonald's the guy who isn't just an X factor for this game. He's an X factor for the Jets this entire season. He's not going to be someone you want on the field outside of situational pass rush downs. You can run it right at him. He's going down. He's just too slight. He's just too raw. At the same time, that man has a spin move that makes no sense. He has moves that are Matrix-like. He defies
it's actually like
laws.
Insane. It's way above. I feel like thinking like Jalen Phillips. I remember when we were watching his tape for the Dolphins. Like when he had like a crate. It kind of reminds me. It's a different size because Phillips is like a little bigger, but like guys who are just when it goes, you go, oh my God, that's the greatest move I've ever seen. Like this guy, he's got a bag. It's like the inverse.
There are moments when he's legitimately unblockable, and you are using him as a situational pass rusher, which means you get to just put him up against Colton McKivitz. He's never going to just get lined up accidentally against Trent Williams. He's being thrown in there for one reason and one reason only, and
go win.
Go kill Brock Purdy. And I would be shocked if he doesn't have a sack in this game, given the state of the 49ers pass pro, given Brock Purdy's propensity to hold on to the ball. I think Will McDonald is just going to be a wrecking crew. And that's even if he only plays 33% of the snaps. Yeah. I'm very in on him. And that's the win rate that he can produce in a defense that's this chaotic with a player that's that chaotic. I think has a chance to be a game-wrecking scenario for San Francisco and put the Jets up over the top. But that's my X factor. Who do you have?
I have Devondre Campbell because
that makes a lot of sense.
Aaron Rodgers has seen plenty of Devondre Campbell, and that is one spot. There's unknowns. At safety, it's not clear who's going to start. I mean, Nick Sorensen was asked, like, is George Odom going to start? And then he's like, yeah, George has been good. We also like Malik Mustafa. I was like, oh, are they going to start Mustafa? Yeah. I mean, I'd be interested. I'd be surprised if they do that. But Campbell's like an unknown. Not that he's like a total unknown. He's been in the NFL forever. But does he have that step where, like Malachi Corley, he's a guy that, again, we're not super high on, but he is like a short area target who can run after catch. Do the Jets try and stress him in that way where, they dink and dunk to Corley where they're targeting Devondre Campbell if he can keep up? I think they're going to go after him a little bit because you should test him to see what he's got in the tank. And I think he had a really solid camp. But again, he's had a lot of injuries. After that 2021 season, he's been on a downslope. There's a reason the 49ers were able to get him pretty late in the offseason. It's something that I think is going to go a long way in determining what the ceiling of this defense is, at least in the first half, and whether he's going to be next to Fred Warner all year.
Yeah, there's no question that the Jets are going to try to be isolating him in the run game. It just is what it is. He's the weak link, and the foot speed, as you noted, isn't there anymore. Every tackle seems to end around the horse collar. It could be a really tough scene. That said, he's also a player who has this tremendous amount of experience and can recognize things, I imagine, at a faster rate than if you were to throw in some rookie. And so he might not end up in compromising situations because his brain is able to compensate for what his body doesn't have. But we don't know until the game starts.
I interviewed Fred Warner like earlier this offseason, and he said, I'm not faster than I was. I'm not more athletic than I was, but the game, I see it so much quicker that's where I get that extra step from. And I know that's like you would expect that, but it really is a real thing of you just recognize things, you recognize patterns, and you can trigger on them. So again, that's why he's my X factor. He's got the experience. Does his body have enough left in the tank? We'll find out. I'm not going to decide one way or the other. You want to get into predictions?
Yeah, I think that the Niners win this game. And I've never been accused of being a homer. I'm not going to start now. But I have a hard time imagining that the Jets receivers are going to be able to separate from the 49ers corners And I think that the Niners pass rush is going to get home a lot. And that's just a real problem. This is a head coach in a quarterback league. And I'm going to take the 49ers head coach and I'm going to take their quarterback in a game like this. I do think defenses will get their licks in. I would imagine Brock Purdy has an interception. Again, I think Will McDonald's going to have at least a sack in this game. But it just wouldn't shock me at all if Aaron Rodgers looks slow, indecisive, and at a certain point frustrated in this contest. I wouldn't blame him. And this is probably as good as the 49ers defense is going to look at any point this season, legitimately, because now the injuries start to really pile up with the real action. This is the first game in which you have guys tackling at full speed. Doesn't matter how much you think you're tackling in training camp. You ain't tackling. This is tackling. Yeah. These are dudes out here with a mission to hurt and to up end the ball and to make it last. So I think the Niners are much better equipped. And honestly, I think that the Niners, by the time they get into that game with Seattle, are probably 5-0. I think that they survive whatever that offseason was. I think it's probably a little clunky. Might be a little Philadelphia week 13 last year. Just absolute garbage in the first quarter, and then bam, it clicks and it's over. It might feel that way, but I think that the Niners, with their talent, and specifically with the top-end talent and maybe the top-heavy talent that this roster has, I think that they make good on the challenge of putting hay in the barn before harvest and set themselves up for some serious success this season with a just hellacious second-half schedule with a good win here and a couple more wins down the pipeline.
You got a score prediction?
Yeah, let's go with 27-19. So I'm going to take the Niners by 8.
My score prediction is Niners 27-20.
Okay, well,
one
of us has more faith in kickers. Apparently,
well, it feels like a game where there's going to be quite a few field goals.
Yeah,
that's where I come from. Yeah, I'm with you. You've got two teams that are constructed similarly. One is the proven product. One is not. One has an old quarterback coming off of an Achilles, also protected by a younger guy coming off of an Achilles, which, as much as Dominic Pooney's unproven, he is healthy and looked good.
Sure.
I'm just going to say I'll take the team that I've seen it from, and there's plenty of points of concern on both sides, but pretty similar teams. I trust Shanahan and Purdy much, much more than I trust Rodgers coming off of an Achilles with Nate Hackett calling his plays. So that's where I stand on it.
Listen, we're both taking the Niners to not just win, but to cover as well. And I do want to be clear about this. There are a million universes in which the Jets can win this game.
It wouldn't shock me at all.
The Jets are just an unknown entity right now. We feel more confident in the Niners as a known entity, even with all their questions. If Aaron Rodgers comes out and, the whale humping sounds have healed him in ways that cannot be explained by modern medicine, this could be a very different ball game. But a certain point, I'm going to bet on Father Time. I'm going to bet on what my eyes saw the last time I saw Aaron Rodgers, and I'm going to bet on the 49ers very, very highly paid players executing at a very, very high level here at the moment when they're most fresh. So we'll see what all happens, and excited to break it down with you on the other side of it, Jake.
Yes, sir.